Well, thank you very much indeed. And now we'll get to the first of our case studies of, particularly in the industry, the construction industry. And I learned that in particular this is one of the areas that is most desirous of exploring. I think particularly I heard this from Indian representatives last night. And I'd like to welcome two people to the stage who are going to, I should say, by the way, before I go any further, I have been told to be ruthless with time because we've got an enormous amount to get through this morning. So I've got my little signs to show 2 minutes to go, and I will just sort of tap on glasses and so on. So I do hope nobody takes offence if I'm sort of particularly, I've been told by representatives from India, Indian people don't know how to keep to time, so you have to be particularly ruthless. So I'll take, I don't care to make any comment on this, but I shall attempt to keep us to time so that we can all have plenty of time for chatting over morning tea. But can I welcome to the stage Parameswaran and Mr Bruce MacKenzie from Holmesglen. Now they've going to present us with, I think, a great case study of good collaboration. Param's the CEO of the GMR Group's EPC division. He was instrumental in establishing their Skills Development Institute in Hyderabad in collaboration with Holmesglen, Melbourne, primarily for developing foremen for the construction industry. And Bruce MacKenzie is really a veteran, the Chief Executive of Holmesglen since 1982, a founding member of TAFE Directors Australia, its Deputy Chair for 9 years, and a great deal to tell us. So I'm going to welcome them both to bring us some real on-the-ground experience. Bruce and Param.
Good morning to all my colleagues from India and to also those who are present from Australia. I was asked to come and just present to you how we initiated a relationship with a very good training provider from Australia, Holmesglen, and what were the compulsions that made us do it. So I'll take you through today a very short, and I promise you I will keep to my time, and brief presentation on really how we ended up tying up with TAFE Australia to do our training. We are a very large infrastructure developer in India. We were established in 1978. We have a gross block, which is a total net asset running at about 9 billion US. We own the Hyderabad airport. We have a shareholding with the Indian government for Delhi airport. We have an airport in Istanbul on the Asian side called Sabiha Gökçen. And we are now currently building an airport in Mali, the Mali International Airport. We're the 4th largest airport developer in the world. We are the largest highway developer in India by lane kilometers. We own 6 power stations. We are one of the largest power providers in India. And for those who are cricket lovers, we also own the IPL Delhi Daredevils. Most of the labor in India are generally unskilled. And there's a huge transient migratory labor in India who move from project to project. And there is a huge gap between the engineer and the labor. And that's what we will try to explore today with you and explain how we went about filling that gap. If you look at the value chain in a construction site, it consists of the project managers and the engineers at the very highest level. And there's the supervisors and foremen who form the bridge between the skilled labor and the managers. Now in India, this class of people have virtually disappeared from the market. Either they are in Dubai, they are in Singapore, they've gone overseas, and those who exist in India have become subcontractors. So a lot of major contractors are finding that this layer of people who are the key bridge between the top management and the labor are missing. And it is filled by subcontractors. And increasingly, with the growth in India, there aren't enough subcontractors to fill that gap. And employers who are EPC contractors, we've had to look how to go downstream. Rather than subcontracting work, we had to look how to go downstream to do our work direct. And therefore, we had a compulsion now to find this group of people that we needed to develop. And this is the story that we had to work on. Now, we looked at whether we could build it in India or whether we needed to go overseas. And we had a few choices. If we looked at Germany, the German model, we knew we had to go overseas, but we had to look at some models that we had worldwide. We had to look at the German model. In terms of quality of construction, Germany has got a very high quality, similar to the UK and Australia. If I look at quality of construction training curriculum, Germany is good, UK is reasonably good. Australia, we found the relationship between industry and government was much better in this country. It was more industry-driven than Germany. And so we looked at this model in Australia as a suitable model to explore further. From a cost-effectiveness point of view, things have changed since 2009. Australia has become a lot more expensive because of the appreciation of the Australian dollar compared to the euro. But that's past now with us because we've gone forward and we've built up our own cadre of trainees and trainers. In terms of communication effectiveness and adaptability towards the Indian situation, we found the Australian population a much easier bunch to adapt to our Indian conditions compared to German. And the last one is overall fit. We looked at all three parameters when we felt that Australia was the best fit. And we had an opportunity to look at 4 models. One was to build a full-fledged training school, similar to what you have in TAFE. But that would have taken us too long. The second choice we had was to partner with vocational training schools in India. And we found that it didn't suit us because the quality of the equipment in the training schools in the ITI were more suited to industry than to construction. So we decided that that wasn't suitable for us either. Then we had to look at skills upgradation training with labor. We found this a very, very tall proposition. And the schools that we went to see, the attrition rate was high as 70%. Most people who go into labor training are not able to retain the labor because labor by its very nature is very migratory unless you employed labor in India. And in India, we generally don't employ labor because of the very difficult labor laws in the country. So that was a choice we decided that would not be suitable for us. So we went to the last option, which is how can we scale up to train 8,000 to 10,000 workers a year with a model that would allow us to have long-term training on the site, on-the-job training where a trainer would be able to train a labor for a much longer duration than 3 months. Because we realized that to get labor trained to the level we wanted, it would take us at least 2 years to reach a certain level. So we looked at the train-the-trainer model, which we found the most suitable model that will allow us to have scalability, quality of training, and flexible. We could train labor with a ratio of 1:40, we could train from 1:20, we could make it 1:10, depending on the quality of the labor that we got. We found this a very flexible model, and that's the model we adopted eventually. Around 2008, there were a lot of aid companies who were coming to India, the so-called RTOs, which were and one of them was a company called Oricon. They have an arm called IDSS, and they visited us one day because we have a very large corporate social responsibility arm, and they came to India to meet up with the CSR arm, and they were talking about skills training. And I managed to meet up with them, and they introduced us to what the vocational training system in Australia was. And one thing I'd like to share with you is, I don't think the Australian training centers do enough to educate us on really how you do it. We know what you do, but we don't know how you do it. We're just totally lost. I mean, I had to look at 300 tapes. I mean, what do? You know, you have 300, 400 tapes in every state. And trying to pick the right tape was a huge challenge. So we needed an intermediary. And IDSS provided us the kind of fit where they were able to identify the right tapes to work with in Australia. And they introduced us to Holmesglen. Now, of course, Oricon went through a cycle of change. They bought up in a South African company, and they decided that they wouldn't go forward with this training initiative with us. And we came to Australia, and we met up with Holmesglen, and we found that Holmesglen would be a suitable partner. And eventually, we decided to tie up with them because we had a compulsion to start the training immediately. But it also fit with our organization's social upliftment because of our CSR activities. We realized that if we were to have training on site, we would be able to train labor from the local villages, and that would give us social upliftment wherever we went in the country. So that fit with our overall view, and our board gave us a go-ahead to tie up with Holmesglen. And you can see here we have got candidates from all over the country. We've selected candidates from almost every state in India to ensure that we have a diverse background of trainers who would be able to train workers from any part of the country and also in the local language. In India, we have something like, about 100 different languages. So we needed to have people as diverse from across the country so that they would be able to provide training to labor from any part of the country. If you look at the qualification of the people we have, 66% experience is about 8 to 12 years. So our selection criteria was to select skilled carpenters who had not gone through a structured approach of skill, trades, and was able to teach. The key was that he had to be trained to be able to teach. And one of the modules that Holmesglen gives to us is the training module. One of the trainers comes to India every year, and they provide training to our trainees on how to teach. The age of our trainees are between 25 to 35 years old, the age when they are about 12 years experience. And most of them have 10th grade plus ITI. So they have got some knowledge. They had to speak reasonable level of English, otherwise we couldn't get training done from Australian trainers. And they needed to understand the Australian, the style. So we needed to have people of a certain level. Now we thought we would not be able to do it 10th grade, but to our surprise, our best candidates are coming from the 10th grade. 12th grade, we've also got some, but 10th grade is adequate for us to get training done. This is the Skills Institute we set up in India. As you can see, we had to take them through computer skills because they need to be able to calculate quantities, which we want every foreman to do. We wanted them to have personality development, more on attitude and aptitude. The training is real training. They had to be able to cut timber and build a roof. It had to be concrete that was cast and thrown away. It had to be rebar that was cut, bent, measured, and it would be discarded. So it was real, actual training that they would do on the ground. It was not simulated. And we have quite a few training that we've taken from Holmesglen on structural trades. And currently we're doing mainly structural trades, and we've had one module of finishing trades. Now this school is really becoming the soul of our company, because if we could provide training for almost any trade that we wanted to develop, from structural to finishing to glazing to aluminium. Now, when we looked at the model of this training, it would provide our company to be able to do a training for a specific course that we wanted in a specific area of the industry that we wanted to do. So it is very, very focused. And by tying up with an organization that has got the total breadth of products, we'd be able to select really what we wanted to do. These are the Australian trainers in Hyderabad, where we have this training school. And you can see we've got full cutting tools, power tools. Although in India we don't really provide very much power tools to our trainees, but here we encourage them to use as much power tools as possible. You can see the training is done in very good quality training center. And we've got external areas where they have to work. And you can see that is a roof truss on the far right, where they'd have to build a complete roof truss before they would be able to say you've completed the training. So that is the last step. So they'd have to do a roof truss, at least, to show that they'd be able to cut, measure, and to build a roof truss. And here is the structural training for concrete. On the middle is they're building the columns for a building. And these are cast on site. And the reinforcement, cutting, and survey. They have to do survey and setting out. Now, one of the key things that I learned about the Australian model when I went to Holmesglen was we could get 10th grade school leavers, but with some hand skills, if they were learnt technique, if they were just taught technique of setting out, measuring, doing basic hand skills, we could mold them into any trade that we wanted, depending on their ability to have good hand skills. And all we had to impart to them was technique. And that, I think, was the greatest learning I had when I came to Holmesglen, to see the way they imparted the training to the candidates in Australia. We've done bricklaying, we've done gypsum and sealing, we've tile cutting. We are doing 2 big buildings now in Bangalore where a lot of these trainers are being employed. They go through technical and proficiency tests every week, and they would be graded. And the Australian trainers grade every one of the trainees, and I'd see the results of all these trainees over a period of 3 months. So you can see they have got technical proficiency, they've got teaching skills, ability to learn, verbal expression, and understanding teaching. So they go through a whole series of tests before we can say that these people are suitable for sight. This is just a full-scale structure that they had to do on site. But we've had challenges. It's not been an easy journey. When we started looking at this training scheme, it was in 2008. And 2009 was a very bad year when there were so many problems in Australia with Indian students being, there's violence in Australia, that we lost the opportunity to send our trainers to Australia. The first model was to send 20 trainers to Holmesglen in Melbourne for training. We couldn't get visas. So that was an almost job stopper. Now, the key thing is, when we worked with Holmesglen, they were flexible enough to rejig the entire model. They came back to us and said, okay, you can't send them to Australia. Why don't we send our trainers to Hyderabad? I was a bit worried because I was wondering if Australian trainers would be willing to come to India to actually do training and live in India for a period of time. But fortunately, they managed to send 3 trainers to India to do training. And that was a blessing in disguise, because now we could get trainers from Australia who could come to India and do training for a large group of people, rather than us sending 10 trainers to Australia and then having to come back and take a chance whether they would be able to teach or learn fully. So that was the first major hurdle we had. The second major hurdle was the tax regime in India, where we had to have withholding tax. Now, a lot of Australian companies just go ballistic when they hear that we're going to hold withholding tax. I mean, this is like, a huge job stopper. And fortunately, with Holmesglen, we discussed it for a long time. And it took us about 4 months to get the Australian tax authorities to get registered with Holmesglen, our Indian tax authorities to get registered with us, and for us to have what they call withholding tax held in India so that there'll be some double taxation treaty. It took us 4 months. And it was really a time when I thought that this deal would be broken. So it was very difficult for that one or 2 years. But internally, we also have challenges, because once we have trainers coming through a structured school system, mixing with people who are already on site, who are supervisors, who come from different companies, generally, I found that it's very difficult to get buy-in across the organization. These guys are special, they've been trained in this SDI by Australian trainers. And then what do you do with the existing supervisors who are on site? How do we get them to integrate? So integration is a very, very key issue that we had to deal with, and that is a key success factor. The second issue is, how do we recruit people who would be able to get trained in a very structured environment and in a language that they didn't really understand, and that would be English. Unfortunately, we were able to overcome this because all of them had to go for English classes. So they had to learn some rudimentary English. Even if it's an Australian slang, they would have to learn some basic rudimentary English so they could understand the training. And we had interpreters in our training center to assist them. The third area is a curriculum finalization and training package. It's very difficult to know what you want when you really don't know what you want. For us to go to Holmesglen and say, look, this is what I want, it took us a while for us to structure the entire curriculum. And Holmesglen sent 2 people, and they spent 1 month in our office sitting down with us, going to our sites, they visited all the sites to look at the current level of skills that we had with labor. And then they came back to us and we structured it together. So it was a joint collaborative effort rather than us having to tell, what we wanted, and then the Holmesglen trying to figure out really what we figured we want. So we had to work together, and that initial part of the whole exercise was funded by Holmesglen. So they had to take a leap of faith with us to really come to Australia, to spend the time to do the entire curriculum planning for us. Now we are going to, and the last one that we had to deal with is, how do we retain these master trainers after we finish training? The greatest issue that we had was, if we finished the training and they would say be fully trained, somebody could come along and poach them for double the salary, we'd probably lose all our people. So we had to come through a whole series of strategies on how we'd retain them, and that's what I'd like to take you next. We have them bonded for 5 years, and legally there's no such thing as a bond in India. We know it, but we just want to have some sort of deterrent that would not allow people to just leave for the flimsiest of reasons. So although we find bonds are not really enforceable, but we feel it's a sufficient deterrent as a first step. The second area is we wanted to give them a career path, because one of the areas where we want to see these people move up is not just as a trained foreman, but we want to make it part of a career path for an individual who joins our organization for the long term. So we looked at joining up with IGNOU, and we were to facilitate it through our Varalakshmi Community College that we have in Vizag. So we looked at a model where we could give them a career path that would move them up the corporate ladder in our organization. In fact, we've got an organization structure today with a career path specifically for foremen drafted out. So they will be able to see a long-term position in our group. The third area is for the top performing trainers and supervisors. They can also become our subcontractors. We want to make them part of our ecosystem for the long run. So if they were to stay with us, they could be our staff, they could have a career path, or if they choose to be, they could also become a subcontractor in the long run. So we want to create a package for them so that they can become our labor subcontractors. Finally, we have got job satisfaction for them, where I spend a lot of time on the ground trying to make sure that, you know, the master-slave mentality of the industry does not translate into making these people leave the organization. So we not only have to train the trainer, but we have to train our own people to treat them with a little bit more respect than they do with generally the way they treat foremen in our construction industry. So we had to elevate their position to one where they would be monitored by the very highest levels of the organization to ensure that there's dignity for what they do. And through this exercise, we expect over the next and it's not an immediate step, but it's going to take us 2 to 3 years to make sure that the people in our organization realize that these people command respect of the top management. And finally, we want to have a connect between our school and the trainer for the 5 years that he's bonded to us or he's working with us. We have a connect to the school. Any trainer, any trainee who's gone through our school has got to connect back to the college. He has communicated every week. 5 of them are called to find out how they're doing, how is the situation on site, have they got any issues that we need to address. And I get that communicated on a monthly basis. And on an annual basis, we have also got reviews of the performance. Out of the 128 that we have on site today, we have got an exceed expectation of about 14. We've got about 90 to 100 of them who are just meeting expectations. And we have 7 who are not meeting expectations. Now, I've got to deal with this 7 somehow. And that's the next step in our journey. How do we deal with those who are not performing? So we see 3 parts to this wheel. The individual, he will have better employability, better wages, improved social status. For the employer like us, we get better quality, we get better cost structure because the engineers who are now supervising work can be moved on to do better things, and the foremen can do what our engineers are doing today. And for society as a whole, we have inclusive growth, and we'd be able to have social harmony. So we see this as a very sustainable model in the long run. The major issue we have is with cost. The model we have has got a fairly high cost structure. Now, the issue with cost comes about primarily because for 2 reasons. It's not only because of the Australian cost of education, but it's because of the teaching of technique that requires us to have materials on the site that has to be spent and wasted. We can't have a simulated approach to training. It doesn't work. And unless we are able to invest in this for the long run, we will not have skilled master trainers. And that is the lesson we have here today, is that unless we're willing to invest significantly more into training by having them to really work through materials and to produce products that are made from scratch, we won't have a skilled master trainer. And that's our lesson, and we've invested. We're very happy with our relationship with Holmesglen. We see it as a long-term relationship. The next step in our journey is we want to see now a layer of apprentices that we are looking at. Because the master trainers on site today who are training the labor are becoming increasingly transient. Labor who used to stay for us for 1 year are now staying with us only for 3 months. It's become that acute in the country. So what we are seeing today is the master trainers are not able to really impart training to the level that they want on the ground because the number of labor that they have is just too transient. So now we're looking at an apprenticeship scheme, and we are looking to work with existing organizations in India who produce what we call very basic trained individuals coming out from the schools in India, from the trade schools, and we're looking to see how to create a layer of apprentices who then work under these master trainers. so we can create a pipeline of apprentices who would move on to be a master trainers in the future. And this is the next step in our journey for us to develop a sustainable model. We see also in the coming years an opportunity for Australia and India to work together, because there is a huge export market for talent from India, where we would be able to find some way of using an Australian certification for an export model. And if we can make that work, we see markets where there's a huge amount of Indian labor working, particularly in Middle East, in Singapore. There's a potential that with industry like us, working with industry in Australia to find a way to certify workers or train foremen, we would be able to have some sort of an export model. And this is something that we're looking for in the future. It is something that we will explore. And I think the journey will take us there one day. And that's just a photo of the last graduation ceremony. All our trainers have a graduation ceremony, just like a college. We conduct it so that there is a ritual, and they go back from our training scheme with a certificate that we give to them that says you are now an accredited master trainer with GMR. Thank you. I'll hand you over to Bruce to just give you some of his perspectives of how we manage the whole process. Thank you.
Good morning, and thank you for the invitation to be here to talk to you about our partnership with GMR. I'm only going to speak very briefly. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Holmesglen and talk to you about some of the lessons that we've learnt from doing this project work in India, which may be of benefit to some of you who are thinking about forging future partnerships. Holmesglen is a large publicly government-owned, well, sort of government-owned. In Victoria, the government has some sort of difficulty, I think, in accepting responsibility for TAFE institutions, but it's certainly one of, it's an Australian joke, that, by the way, one of the largest public institutions in Australia. We have about 50,000 students a year enrol at Holmesglen. Most of them are Australian students. We have a very large international student body of about 3,500 students who regularly attend the institution. We offer programs across senior, secondary, vocational and higher educations. We have about 14 degrees of our own in a variety of areas. All of our degrees are based upon, there was no degree developed at Holmesglen that doesn't have underpinning vet qualifications. So we don't develop a degree because we think it's a good idea. We develop a degree to try and ensure that our students who are doing an apprenticeship program or a certificate for have an opportunity to go on and do higher education. So most of our degrees are very applied. They're in building, nursing, design and related areas. We specialise in building, engineering, design, health sciences and business. And our strategy is to build partnerships and alliances. And we have a lot of long-standing alliances and partnerships all over the world and in Australia. We value those partnerships greatly. The partnership with GMR has been a very pleasant and enjoyable experience, notwithstanding some of the difficulties that the regulatory authorities place upon us. And I can assure you, for those of you who are thinking of going to India, that the facility that GMR has built is a high quality facility, even by Australian standards. It's a very interesting model, I think, because it's not qualifications focused. And one of the real difficulties we have when we talk to government is that qualifications are perhaps important, but for commercial organisations, it's getting the right skill mix that is far more significant. And this focus on qualifications is not helpful in terms of project work in the commercial sector. Holmesglen has a lot of international projects as well as a lot of international students, and these are our more recent projects. We work in the Middle East in Qatar. We're the master trainer for the Doha Asian Games. We have a contract with Qatar Petroleum. We have a contract with Shell in Qatar, and we have a contract with the Qatar Central Bank. All of those contracts we have in Qatar are directly related to vocational education and training. And I guess the point I wanted to make, and it was interesting to hear the Minister speak today, is that project work is essentially vocational education and training work. Most countries have good tertiary institutions, very good universities. Most countries have reasonable secondary and primary systems. Very few have excellent vocational education systems. And Australia is one of those very lucky countries that has a great vocational education and training system. And it should be a major focus of government's efforts to improve export industry, but it's not understood. It's not understood by governments, and I suspect it's not understood by policy makers just how significant our vet system is. We also have contracts in Mongolia. It's very handy having a contract in Mongolia because staff you don't like, you can suggest to them that they might like to work in another campus, and I've used that to great effect recently. We have a contract in India, and we had another very interesting project in Sri Lanka, which in Batticaloa, it's been completed a couple of years ago. It arose as a result of the tsunamis, and the Victorian government actually invested some money in helping Sri Lanka overcome the effects of the tsunami benefit. This was the only project that was actually completed. It was quite a dangerous project because it was in an area surrounded by Tamils, and so they used to occasionally take white faces as hostages, and so it was difficult getting staff there. But the project was a great success. It was a small school, and we basically did institutional strengthening and rebuilt some of the enterprise-based activities that this small technical school undertook. In terms of this project with GMR, I'm just going to slip through a few slides because a lot of what Param said I was going to say. What we're doing is that the model is one of diminishing responsibility on the part of the Australians, and so we initially started primarily training with Australian trainers only, and over a period of time the very good master trainers that GMR identify come in and co-train with our own instructors. And so, as you can see, stage 3, the final stage of this program, we're only using one Australian trainer, and most of the training is done by GMR. It's probable, I think Param would say, that we'll always have one Australian trainer involved as well, but it'll be primarily done by locals, the development of the master trainers. In terms of what I've learnt about and what we've learnt about working internationally, and also in terms of working with GMR, I guess the first thing is to be clear about the regulatory impediments. We were surprised and disappointed that the Australian government wouldn't allow GMR people to travel to Holmesglen, and I think it is an issue for international education and also for project work, that we understand that organisations like Holmesglen, with 50,000 students, have been in existence for 30 years and turn over significant amounts of money, are not going to behave disreputably. And there needs to be given some sort of understanding that when you have a company like GMR, which owns massive assets, and an institution such as Holmesglen of that size, that the government needs to treat them differently to treating perhaps organisations with less of a history and with less asset backing and reputation in the field. Param mentioned the tax issue, and the tax issue wouldn't have been solved had it not been for GMR. We used an international accounting firm in Australia to try and resolve this issue of withholding tax and couldn't get it fixed. So there is a bit of a problem we found in Australia with the service industry being able to address international taxation issues, and that occurred also in Qatar for us and also in Bahrain. One of the important things we think about successful project work, and this has probably proven the case with GMR, is that we started small. The deliverables were very clearly defined by GMR. It wasn't about just giving them an Australian qualification. In fact, the participants don't get an Australian qualification. What they do is they get skills that will enable them to be able to perform effectively in a commercial setting. And that is far more valuable to an individual than just getting a piece of paper. To be able to work effectively is important. So working through the deliverables we found to be very, very important. Successful projects can get government support. That hasn't been the case with Holmesglen, but we do think that it's interesting this conference is being held. It's actually not full of universities, as most government bilateral conferences are, that we're actually focusing on vocational education and training. Australia, as I say, has a great vocational education and training system, and it's one which we need to leverage. And as Param said, not enough people in the world know just how good Australia is at vocational education and training. And in the Asia-Pacific region, we are without a peer. We are the best, and we need to export that capacity more than we do. One of the biggest difficulties of operating in countries such as India and Mongolia, especially when it's minus 40 degrees in Mongolia, is to try and get the right staff. And you do need staff that are adaptable, that will live in a different culture and will respect that particular culture. This model's been quite a good one because the staff haven't had to go offshore for long periods of time. So they've been offshore for 6, 8 to 10 weeks. So it's been a good introduction to a new culture for a lot of our staff who are primarily tradespeople and haven't travelled extensively throughout the world. And now, because of the way in which the housing's been set up and the way in which they've been treated and the way in which they've been treated by the students, which is probably a pleasant change from their Australian students, it's been good for them. It's built their image, and it's also means that people now want to go to work on this project. So we can start to do much longer term stays, which will reduce the cost of the project. One of the areas that we really stress to our staff when they leave is that whilst you will make great friends with the trainees and great friends with the administrators, it's not your country and it's not your company. You're there as a guest, and you don't get involved with the politics of the country, and you don't get involved with the politics of the organisation. You don't get involved with the politics of the individuals, because all people bring different things to different projects. And I've seen on aid projects where people become absolute experts overnight, that they know everything about the country and everything about the company that they're working with. So we do stress that to our staff that they shouldn't be involved in the politics of the host organisation. That also relates back to staffing fit. One of the great advantages of dealing directly with a TAFE institution and a TAFE institution directly delivering the project is that you get high quality staff being sent by the institution across. Many aid projects and many projects I've seen, you get second tier staff or subcontracted staff who are sent off to do a program, and that usually leads to fairly ordinary outcomes. In the case of GMR, because they were such a commercially focused organisation and they wanted quantifiable results as a result of the project, only the very best of staff would be effective. One of the broader issues for us, and that has occurred in Bahrain, which blew up, as you all be aware, and Bataclan was another one, was that if you're going to do international projects, you really do need to have a capacity to withdraw staff. Bahrain, when we worked there, would have been probably one of the nicest, most pleasant places that we've been in. But suddenly it turned very hostile, and it was a dangerous place for people to be. So you have to have a plan to get your staff out of the country, especially in projects which are quite long term. Some people believe, and I think this is one of the real issues for Australian governments to understand, and that is that international student recruitment and project work are totally unrelated. There is no real gain. There's totally different businesses and totally different processes. If you want to get into project work, don't rely on your international student recruiters to lead you into project work. It really is business to business, and a lot of it's opportunistic, and a lot of it's luck. And that leads me to my final point that I wanted to make, and that is that if you are going to go into project work, you need to build strong connections with sponsors offshore, and you need to develop a capability. So if you have got project work, you need to develop that up inside your organisation and make sure it's readily available to people, so they've got a resume of the capacity of your organisation in actually doing something rather than talking about it. So a resume of your project work is extraordinarily important. And finally, I wanted to make the point, a lot of organisations, TAFE institutes, believe that international work's not important. Well, I think it is. TAFE its great reputation in Australia is because we are linked to industry. Most large-scale industries now are global, and our education system also needs to be global. So I would recommend to you that if you aren't in project work and you aren't in international student work, you think about it, because you are in a global industry, and the industries you serve are in fact global. So thank you for the invitation to speak today. Param, thank you for the work that you've given us, and may it continue on. Thanks.
Thank you both. That was really that was a terrific kick-off, I must say. And I shall be contacting you both for interviews in the time to come. I particularly thought it was Param's invitation which was made to me last night. Why have you produced? How have you produced? Can you explain to me the system that you have produced and put words to it? And that was really Param's invitation. I thought very pertinent, and maybe I put that into the ether. And also just Bruce's incredible, that pragmatic sense and utter strategic ability, but very much being aware of where you're hemmed in and where you're not. I thought it was just terrific. So thank you very much indeed.